And what's up? Welcome in GC Live Wednesday episode of the show. As always, presented by our good friend Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network. ClintHammond.com. 803-771-6933 is how you can get in touch with Clint. And of course, he is the branch manager right here in Columbia, South Carolina of the Columbia Mortgage Network. You can email him, chammond@mortgagenetwork.com, and his NMLS number is 71597. Of course, we appreciate Clint being our presenting sponsor. Big-time Gamecock Central fan as well. And certainly interest rates are as low as they've ever been. So if you're in the market to buy a house or if you just want to refinance and maybe save a little bit of money each month, Clint is your guy. Give him a shout. Promise you he will take care of you. Again, he's Chris. I'm Wes. This is GC Live. And we don't have the big news we had to talk about last show. Chris, last show did some numbers, man. I guess people were excited to talk about some commits. That was actually the last three shows have been probably three of our biggest of the offseason as far as the pure views go. But so we'll sort of take a little bit of a step back and talk a little bit about some guys who are making decisions soon. Some of them actually have dates locked in. And then some guys who have announced some final groupings and maybe haven't announced dates, but could be deciding soon. Dude, this is the trend right now. Like, I really think we're going to see this continue. Kids who took all these visits in June, right? Then they're processing the information they got, and now they're either going to commit at some point in July, or then I think there'll be some guys. There's that final week of July where prospects can visit again. I think kids will take some visits then, maybe while they're on campus or maybe shortly after campus. After they get off campus, I think we're going to see another run of commitments then as well. Not necessarily speaking was about South Carolina. I just mean in general recruiting this summer. That seems to be a trend because we know guys are going to want to get it over with before their senior season start.
Yeah, didn't you break it down into seasons? Last month was visit season, and then it's about to be commitment season.
That's SZN season.
With a hashtag in front. I think this first week of July, really the end of June, this first week of July has been like top 5 season SZN hashtag, because we've seen a lot of guys do this. You know, some guys have kind of narrowed things down a little bit, either at the beginning of June because they kind of had some official visits outlined, or they did it kind of in the midst of June. You know, just off the top of my head, we saw, Oscar Delp put out a top 5, final 5, whatever you want to call it. Really nobody else is in the mix aside from those, and even a school or two in that top 5, not really in the mix. Ryan Brubaker, who's now committed to South Carolina, he already had kind of his 5, took a slate of official visits. South Carolina set the bar. He ended up committing there. But there's another, kind of core group of guys that we'll go into here that, they've narrowed their focus to, whether they did it a little bit later in June or in the midst of June or right after finishing out some official visits in June. Some of those guys have another visit or two to take. Some will be able to go out, like you said, Wes, at the end of this month when you have a 1-week kind of open period for recruiting where they can go visit. And some of them are going to be able to hold things off and get into the season, maybe go see a game or two at a few of their places. But a lot of foci, however you say it, kind of narrowing for these prospects.
Yeah, we're going to get into some of these guys. We've talked about some of them already throughout the week. This will be an abbreviated show. We're a little bit later getting on the normal, but we still wanted to not skip the Wednesday show. And I was going through the list earlier, Chris. By the way, for those of you who haven't been on Gamecock Central today, a little bit going on with men's basketball. Frank Martin speaking today. I think Chuck Martin speaking today. Brian Steele speaking today. So Colin Taylor will, of course, have and already has updates on that going on. And again, the last couple of days, guys announcing final groups, guys announcing commitment times. I've got a story up with Carson Black, the in-state quarterback, Nation Ford High School class of 2023 kid. Finally caught up with him. He took 2 visits to South Carolina in June. So appreciate him doing that interview. So if you're into all that stuff, that's up on GamecockCentral.com. Some of it for subscribers and some of it free. But we already talked about it. I believe this news had hit before we did the show earlier this week, Chris. But 4-star back Ramon Brown will reveal his decision Friday at 5 o'clock. You had South Carolina, Penn State, Virginia Tech, West Virginia, and Maryland. We talked quite a bit about what type of player he is, but we were still digging. We were still sort of trying to figure out what direction this was going to go. I think independently, we've heard some various things here that sort of match up, man. I think our initial instinct, it's not confirmed yet. We'll see what he does on Friday, but our initial instinct was going to be that Virginia Tech was probably going to be tough to beat. In my opinion, that's probably still where this one sits right now. I'm sure South Carolina will try to, finish it out and make any final pitches in the next couple of days. But I would give Virginia Tech the advantage if I was putting percentages on it.
Yeah, Virginia Tech, and I think the other program that I believe we both heard, West, Maryland, also in there too. And so when you look at that, DMV area kid, 2 DMV schools as the finalists. So, all South Carolina in some ways was the outlier, right, as far as his college options. I don't know if he ended up taking that visit to Tennessee, West, that he discussed. I don't know if you know off the top of your head an unofficial visit to Tennessee. I don't believe he did. But South Carolina being kind of the outlier in that, it was the only SEC program, and it was the only program kind of this far down south. And so one thing that was told to me was, and I think we made this same point before, Gamecocks got in on this guy late, right? Like he already had 4 official visits basically laid out, scheduled, if not kind of loosely on the books, had 1 left. South Carolina wanted to try to get in on the kid, and they were able to get him on campus. That said, the relationships there, because this is a brand new staff at a school that really, had not been recruiting him with that staff, it came on late. And so they got a visit. Looks like the pick will be elsewhere. Now, the natural question people have, will they keep recruiting him? Could things change? I don't know that we have the answers to that right now. I think you made a great point on the Insiders Forum this morning, Wes, when somebody asked about Brown and Jalen Glover out of Florida. Gamecocks aimed high in this class, right? They're not just going out recruiting just anybody at running back. They've set their sights on some big targets, kind of taking a big swing because it's not a giant need position in terms of numbers.
And I think, Chris, another trend there, they're swinging big at that position, and they're not taking that approach. Montario Hardesty does not seem to believe in taking that approach where you offer 25 kids at the running back spot and you're talking to all of them and you're telling them all the same things and you're giving them the same exact recruiting pitch. It's been more of A, let's swing for the fences. B, let's swing after sort of a pretty tight little group. Now, I think if they miss Ramon Brown as expected, they really want Jalen Glover. That he remains a top target, but a big portion of those sort of maybe 5 or 6 guys we've been tracking the most have now started to sort of commit elsewhere. So I do think, man, that's when you'll maybe see this thing expand out a little bit more and you start to get into a next group of guys there. I'll tell you, man, I'm intrigued. There's a kid we haven't talked about a lot at all, but Jazion Patterson, a kid that visited with his group of teammates. A huge group came in from down in Florida. They always come to South Carolina's camps. They were up again this year. And, I think as a guy, he's spoken very highly of South Carolina. So I don't know that we know exactly who the next guys would be if Ramon Brown, if South Carolina misses on him as expected. But we do know that they'll continue to swing on Jalen Glover and that, maybe another name or two, not necessarily is even new, but just becomes more to the forefront.
Yeah, and a lot of people have asked, at that point, I've gotten this more than once in the past couple of days, will South Carolina kind of double back on CJ Stokes out of Hammond, local kid from Columbia? We don't know. Is it possible? Something we'd at least ask that question and try to figure out, even if are the chances high of something cooking mutually between those two parties? I don't know. Maybe not a super high chance, but there might be some new names crop up on the board. Could South Carolina just at some point stand pat in this class and say, you know what, we'll go out. If we don't land the guy that we want in this class, we don't want to reach. Let's go out and sign one or two really good ones in the next class. Is that possible? That's something we'll ask at that point. But Brown, like you said, expected to go elsewhere. Would it be over? Would it? I don't know. We'll certainly monitor that. But then Jalen Glover and then some other guys that could pop up. But I think you hit on it earlier. Kind of that core wish list or dream list of 4, 5, 6 guys. We have started seeing some of those commit elsewhere. Dallin Hayden, a guy that South Carolina had some ties to, maybe angling for a visit. He commits to Ohio State. You got Ramon Brown. Nick Singleton's a guy that the new staff didn't really seem to gain any traction with, but he commits to Penn State. Really good get for them. So there's definitely been some movement at that position, and things maybe clearing up in some ways from a regional national picture, but making it a little bit murkier for South Carolina right now.
Yeah, and I think that's a spot, man. South Carolina has such good young talent at the position right now. Plus, you have a coach coming in late. You're gonna have a little easier sell, frankly, with 2023 because Hardesty's personality is gonna play. Like I promise you, this guy's going to sign really good players at that position. I have no doubts about that. Now, are you sort of at a little bit of a disadvantage right now? It's a huge advantage to take over that room as far as on the field. But as far as recruiting goes, Marshawn Lloyd still has all of his eligibility remaining. So you're going to be fighting that a little bit right now. Give him an entire year to develop some relationships. And now all your guys in that room are a year older, a year closer to exhausting their eligibility, and things play out a little bit differently, I think, moving forward. Doesn't mean they can't sign it. They're not out of it with Jalen Glover. Like, they are still firmly in it. We'll see which way that one goes, but certainly something to monitor there at the running back position moving forward. Also, some movement here recently with defensive backs, and that's a spot where South Carolina is, I believe, going to be selective down the stretch, Chris, and certainly someone that visited South Carolina officially that we have tracked. Chris Graves, a 4-star from Fort Myers, Florida, announces his top 4. South Carolina makes the cut. He's going to announce his school on Friday. I tend to think this is going to be Miami. That seems to have been the trend there. That was the school that was mentioned the most. I think Miami probably feels the best. You have to see all these through, right? Sometimes we get shocked and a guy picks a school nobody expects, but it seems like Miami has been the perceived favorite here with Graves.
Yeah, that's been the one that's had the most buzz, and not even just recently, for quite a while. Graves talking about the U a lot on social media and things like that. And again, another kid, South Carolina's had a big crop of talent at the defensive back position. What did they have that same weekend with Chris Graves and some of the other guys? I think it was 6 4-star defensive backs that were on campus at once, and Graves was one of those. And by all accounts, from what he told us, what we heard, had a good trip. But I think this is a kid from the state of Florida that for some time has kind of been, had his eyes a little bit towards Miami. And so that would be my expectation, certainly on this one with Chris Graves.
Traquan Fagins today, Chris, names his top 5. South Carolina makes the cut here. Another situation of battling the big boys. If you're in a conversation and it involves a football recruit, and it's your school plus Alabama, Georgia, Miami, and Oklahoma, you're after the right people. You're after the right kids, right? You're after the right level of player. I don't have as good of a feel for him. I know there's been talk. There was actually talk on the Alabama message board, just fan speculation, just talk about is he a guy Alabama's pushing for? Is he not a guy Alabama's pushing for? We had some of the same conversations about Antonio Kite, the DB that South Carolina was also recruiting. Alabama was recruiting. Come to find out, that was a guy Bama was going to take and did take. He commits there. So Georgia heavily involved. I don't have as maybe close of a knowledge on this one. Maybe you have some insight on it, Chris, but I know the kid's a heck of a player. He does not have that sort of set in stone decision date that I've seen, but did tell us after his South Carolina official, he was several guys sort of had that terminology of saying, I want to do it soon, want to do it this summer, want to do it before the season, stuff like that. He fits in that same category. Where have you heard where his head may be on this thing moving forward?
Well, and that's a key question, that you hit on with Antonio Kite, the other 4-star DB. When Bama decides that it's going to push for a talented, player, whether it's defensive player, offensive player in its home state, the reality is they don't lose a ton of those battles. Do they lose some? Some, not a ton, very few, in fact. And so that's what happened with Antonio Kite. And it is still, for me, a question, because it was a question until late, right, with Antonio Kite. It's still a question for me of whether or not that's going to be the case with Fagins. Now, if the tide pushes, that no doubt will be a big factor. They are already a big factor. Miami, like we mentioned with Chris Graves, that's another one I've heard a good bit of with Fagins. I think South Carolina is in the conversation. Beyond that, it's kind of hard to say in the pecking order maybe exactly where South Carolina is, other than in that top 5. That's one that has been a little bit harder, just to be honest, to get a firm read on. They did have a really good visit. Family, spoke really highly of the visit, not only just based on what you saw on social media, but some things that I've heard, and kind of been told directly is they were impressed and had a good time. But obviously, take a lot of official visits go well. It takes a lot more than that to sign a guy of this caliber.
Yeah, and they offered his brother while they were on the official visit as well. Offered his younger brother, so that was a cool little. And the brother he's got a bunch of big time offers already, but cool little extra tidbit there for the family to go home with another offer in the fam. I can't imagine that happens very often on official visits where you add another SEC offer to the family. So pretty cool there. I tend to think, man, the guy that we should be tracking and that we are tracking, that maybe of the final DBs, I just get the impression South Carolina's in the best shape with, is Keenan Nelson Jr. This has been a deal where I think, strangely, South Carolina and Penn State have interlocked on the recruiting trail quite a bit this class, maybe more so in past classes. I think those two teams are very strong here with Keenan Nelson. Keenan Nelson has not come out with a decision timetable or anything like that, a specific date, but I think among these final DBs we're keeping an eye on, he's maybe the one I think South Carolina could be in the best shape with.
Yeah, I'm with you on that same page. And I think one reason for that is just that the focus for him seems to be a little bit more narrow. Like I don't think that he's said my list is down to those two schools. But for quite some time, Penn State and South Carolina have been the two main ones mentioned for him. At one point, Notre Dame, was mentioned as kind of a third option. But Penn State and South Carolina for a period of months have been kind of the main two that he's talked about, that have been discussed in kind of the back channels when you're talking with people about Keenan Nelson Jr. Those have been the main guys. And that's remained the same throughout the summer. He went and saw both places, exiting South Carolina visit, same type of deal. And I also get the sense, Wes, that he's not a Penn State lock. Could he end up there? Sure. Home state program. They've been recruiting him hard. He could very well end up there. But that said, I think South Carolina is not getting just token consideration here. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that they have been in that kind of one of two schools that have been mentioned so consistently. And just from what we've heard, that just independently, just some things that we've heard that South Carolina heavily in the mix with them. Not to say they will get him, but they have a legitimate shot, it seems like.
And for those of you on the video feed here, you can see his film in front of you right now. I think as far as just adding a little bit more size to that cornerback spot, man, this is a kid that has that in spades and is, he's a top 200 prospect in the country, that has the big offers, would really, if they could pull this off, it's sort of, to me, it's like a cherry. It's already a good defensive back class, and it's going to be, but this would sort of be the cherry on top to that class, is maybe how I would look at that spot. And yes, you already have a number of guys committed there, but we talked about this earlier, man. That's just a position where if you're in South Carolina's spot right now, if you have a great player, you can't turn them down. You got to make room for them. And I think that's why a lot of these kids we're still talking about, if it was just about numbers in general and maybe you were talking to a few average players, I don't know if we're even still talking about defensive back. But I think when you have this many high-quality 4-star guys in all these cases who took a very recent official visit and took the time to really check out your program, you owe it to yourself to sort of keep recruiting them all, in my opinion.
You do. And, the bonus here, I don't know if bonus is the right word, but just another layer to it, another factor. South Carolina is still, despite having a good, defensive back class, they do have 5, DB commitments. It's all those guys are going to have to compete with each other once they get on campus. So you kind of look at what South Carolina has on campus right now. Obviously, defensive back playing time is something they can sell to anyone. That they've sold it, to prospects who've already committed, and they're going to be able to sell it to Keenan Nelson Jr. and Fagins and anybody else who's on board. The spots are limited now. They can afford to be more selective at this point. But for someone like Nelson, I think is the point I'm trying to make, is they don't look at the situation probably and say, well, there's no room in the class, there's no room on the roster, playing time's an issue. If you're a good defensive back prospect, you're going to have the ability, if you're in this 2022 class for South Carolina, to step on campus. And if you're good enough, you're going to be able to play, because it's, this was the biggest need position on defense heading into this cycle.
Speaking of defensive backs and speaking of playing early, got word from Ronald Paronti, which is Karan Prunty's father, Chris, that he is set to arrive on South Carolina's campus today. So obviously I know when he committed, some guys or some of the fans were wondering when exactly he could be here. It's July 7th. So to me, that's more good news there for South Carolina fans. We knew Prunty was going to be able to come in and play early. You didn't know exactly, especially with a guy that counts forward. I didn't know exactly how it was going to work, when he could get here. Would you have to wait until August? Would you have to wait until August camp starts, all that stuff? He is set to arrive on campus today, which means he will be able to get started pretty much right off the bat and then slide right in at the beginning of preseason camp in August. I'll be curious, Chris, to see just how long does it take before he moves into that cornerback 1 spot with the starting group, because I think that's firmly the expectation here for him.
Yeah, I think Prunty certainly would anticipate that. One of the reasons I'm sure he picked South Carolina, there's playing time on the table. You look at his 2 final options, Tennessee and South Carolina, both those programs holes at defensive back, right? And so he's a good player. He's got the physical tools to be able to contribute early, and I think he's going to have every opportunity to do that. And again, you don't look at this roster and get the sense that anyone's set, really at any spot probably. I think a lot of people, I'll include myself in there, have Cam Smith kind of penciled in at 1 corner spot, but do we even know that for sure? Probably not. I mean, is that a fair expectation? Yeah, but I think at the bare minimum, you'd probably look at one of those corner spots as being pretty open. And so there's going to be every opportunity for Prunty to step in. And again, a guy with a full slate of eligibility, basically, but he already has some college experience and some impactful college experience.
Yeah, again, it's going to be an abbreviated show here, so getting to the point of closing it out. But, Chris, I wanted to finish up. You had an article yesterday on Gamecock Central, subscribers only, but on some guys that you were most impressed with at South Carolina's camp, the Shane Beamer camps that went on for 10 days in June. Chris and I were out there every single day. You had a 7-on-7 going on for 4 of those days as well. Was there a guy on, and by the way, you can go check it out, Gamecock Central by position. Was there a guy or two that impressed you the most out of this entire list?
Whew, yeah, that's a good man. So I'll say this: we saw a lot of really good prospects. Several guys that did not make that list in any form or fashion, were very impressive. I think several, like for instance, 2024 guys that I could have easily listed on here that didn't make the cut. Just looking through, I think maybe the most impressive prospect that we saw in total, like out of any class, any position, Monroe Freeling, the offensive lineman from Oceanside Collegiate. He was outstanding. Just the frame, the size was impressive. Watching him move around, watching him compete, and then in one-on-ones, I mean, nobody stood a chance. I mean, he had everything that you look for in an offensive tackle prospect as far as the frame, the ability to bend, move, get his hands on people. He was probably the most impressive. And I know another one that we saw that created a lot of buzz was Anthony Rose, who eventually, of course, recommitted to South Carolina. We were very, I know, anxious to watch him once we found out he was there, and he didn't disappoint. Great length, ran well, tested well, and did a very good job in the one-on-ones with at least a couple interceptions that we saw.
Yeah, and like you said, man, there's some guys that didn't make the list that I thought that looked outstanding. Another kid, the tight end Ty Lockwood, class of 2023. I personally didn't. I was on the other field. I didn't see him as much out there, but just watching him, just physically looked the part. I thought, but dude, of the entire list, Monroe Freeling was definitely up there.
No doubt,
he was outstanding. If Monroe Freeling had not come to South Carolina's camp, then Cam Pringle would have been up there for me. This kid, as far as just physically, Cam Pringle is one of the best looking rising sophomore offensive linemen that I have ever seen in my life, literally. And but I tell you, man, Dylan Lonergan, the way he spins the football, the way it comes out, the quiet confidence, the leadership there, he's up there for me as well.
Yeah, he was really impressive. I mean, checked all the boxes. I mean, easy release, accuracy, arm strength. Like, he had all those things. They're evident on film, but you watch a guy throw in camp and, you came away saying, all right, that guy looks like a really good player. I'll echo you on Pringle. Nick Emmanwori, I thought, put on a really good performance, in terms of what he looked like and watching him move around. I think another one, we're talking about young offensive lineman in Cam Pringle, in state, Josiah Thompson from Dillon. I think was still 14 years old, wasn't he, at the time of camp? If not, he had just turned 15.
He was late 14 or early 15.
Yeah, I mean, to be that big, 301 pounds, and doesn't look like it, still has a lean frame. Does he have some progression to do? Sure. Remember him watching him go against DeAndre Martin, a senior from Virginia who has a South Carolina, Tennessee offer. He's holding his own and coming back for more, and he's 3 or 4 years younger and not nearly as advanced physically or in age, from a maturity standpoint. So he's got a chance to be really, really good too. And I think he was impressive too.
I took more in watching Josiah Thompson get beat a couple of reps by DeAndre Martin, who had a great camp day. We'll give him credit. Than I did from watching any other prospect even like win a rep, just because this is a super, super young kid. And that, you remember that day, man, both sides, not the players, but like current players that were out there working the camp, there was a little bit of jawing, O-line versus D-line. It was going back and forth. And, the DeAndre Martin kid, he was getting into it. I don't think he realized he was going up against the kid that's the class of 2024 at first. But then, Josiah got beat a couple times. And Josiah walked right back up there and asked for more, which I thought said a lot. Some young guys get thrown in that spot, and they sort of back down a little bit. The fact that his move was to go right back out there, very, very impressive, and I think speaks a ton about Josiah's competitiveness and what that kid is all about. South Carolina in really, I think, safe to say, in really good early shape with him. He had a great visit. I think his family had a great visit, got a lot of love from the South Carolina staff. But, man, I cannot remember a time – we may have talked about this on the show. I know we talked about it off the air. I cannot remember a time when the state of South Carolina had up-and-coming prospects on the offensive line that looked like Josiah Thompson, Monroe Freeling, that looked like Cam Pringle, that looked like who else do we have? I'm missing somebody. Dorman.
Yeah, Marquis Anderson from the
Marquis Anderson.
Yep.
Dude, that's 4 guys coming up in those 23, 24 classes that usually most other years are pretty much like, oh, that's the top offensive lineman in the state this year. And now you have 4 of those guys in 2 classes there. If any of the in-state schools can land 2 or 3 out of those 4, then they're going to be feeling pretty good.
They are. That's a nice crop to choose from. If you're South Carolina and you could somehow sweep those guys, I mean, you would be feeling great. Is that realistic? I don't know. They put themselves back into at least the conversation with Freeling after that camp experience, after that visit. Like you said, they're in the conversation, I think, now with the new staff, with Marquis Anderson too. Obviously, Thompson, Pringle, they're in the conversation with those guys as well. Freeling probably, I mean, he's the best offensive line prospect in the state in a while. I mean, I can't off the top of my head think of one that may be better. I mean, he's really got it all the things that you look for at that position.
And I've said it before, man. The dude swears by yoga, and it works. His flexibility, the bend, all that stuff that offensive line coaches talk about, kid's got it in spades. And we'll see if South Carolina can keep making a push there. There's a lot of early Clemson buzz with him. I think he's highly interested in them. I think he's highly interested in maybe Notre Dame, North Carolina, some schools like that. But South Carolina did at least, I think, put themselves in the conversation with him, whereas before they weren't even in the conversation there. So we'll see. That's one we'll keep tracking and see where it goes. All right, that's the 30-minute mark, a little bit over. Chris, you got any closing thoughts, man?
No closing thoughts. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Sorry for the abbreviated show, but I was going to say I will be back on Friday.
Yes, I will be at the beach. If y'all have any Folly Beach recommendations, hit me on Twitter. I want to know where I should go. But, yeah, I'll be back Monday. We'll still have you covered here on GC Live and Gamecock Central, though. Clint Hammond, Mortgage Network, presenting sponsor, ClintHammond.com. Appreciate him as always, and we appreciate y'all. We'll